With all rivals humbled, destroyed, or driven out, the freehold of Valyria reigned supreme across much of western Essos, from the narrow sea to the Bone Mountains. To bind their vast empire together, the freeholders erected a broad system of roads known to all as the Dragon Roads. Like many of their structures, they were made by fused black stone, forged by dragon flame. They stretched from Pentos to Kohor and Norvos, from the Demon Road to Slaver's Bay, and they once connected the lands of the Long Summer together until the peninsula shattered many years later. Unlike the muddy roads of Westeros, the Valyrian roads were wide enough for 3 wagons to pass side by side, and neither time nor traffic marred them. They still stand to this day, unchanging, centuries after Valyria itself met its doom. Beyond simple roads, the Valyrians were able to communicate across the continent with strange dragonglass candles. This enabled sorcerers to see at a great distance, regardless if it be man or beast. Though the Dragon Lords had accomplished much and more, they were seldom satisfied, and so they expanded their reach beyond Essos. They would establish penal colonies in the Basilisk Isles and in the wild and uncharted Sothorios. Their criminals, rebels, and slaves became subject to cruel experimentations by the Blood Mages. The flesh of both man and beast were twisted and conjoined with one another to fashion monstrous and unnatural chimeras. But the Freehold's gaze was drawn to the west as well as the south, to the 7 kingdoms of Westeros. In preparation for their crossing of the Narrow Sea, the Valyrians seized control over a patchwork of islands off the coast of Blackwater Bay. In time, lesser families would stake their claims over these lonely rocks and raise their seats. The seafaring Valyrians settled on Driftmark, so named after the driftwood that the tides brought in, and the Celtigars held Claw Isle, where they would grow wealthy in the years that followed. But on the largest of the isles, the Valyrians raised a mighty citadel from within the shadows of the volcanic Dragonmont. It was shaped by magic and sorcery into an imposing structure impossible to create by any other means. The castle and the island would be jointly known as Dragonstone. It served as the westernmost outpost of the Valyrian Empire, and as a sign for future conquest. But that day would never come, for 200 years later, the Freehold was destroyed in a cataclysmic event known as the Doom. All 14 flames erupted at once and blackened the skies. The flames shot high and hot that even dragons burned in their death throes. The hills split asunder, and the sea churned, and the waves rose high. The city of 1,000 years, and all that men had learned, was consumed, shattering the Valyrian Peninsula. Thus was born the Smoking Sea, from where the 14 flames once stood. It is a sea of monsters and curses, a sea where no sailor would dare to cross. What caused the doom is unknown. Most believe it to be a simple natural disaster, but septons and priests alike declared that the avarice of the Freehold had awakened the fires of hell that would eventually consume the godless Valyrians. Still others believed that the political intrigue of the Dragon Lords led to the assassinations of too many blood mages that had once tempered the fires of the 14 Flames. What is beyond dispute, however, is that the Doom had destroyed the Valyrian freehold and its empire. They rose too high, craved too hard, dared too much. They looked to grasp a world, overreached, and fell. The Dragon Lords and their dragons were lost in Valyria during the Doom. A few in Tyrosh and Lys were spared from the cataclysm, but in the political upheaval, the citizens rose up and slaughtered them and their dragons. At Qohor, a dragon lord named Arion marshaled an army of 30,000 men and declared himself Emperor of Valyria. On the back of his mighty dragon, he marched south with his host, vowing to reclaim the burning heart of Valyria and restore the empire to its glory. Alas, the emperor and his army were never seen again. The time of Valyria had truly come to an end. But the age of dragons had not yet died out. For 12 years before the Doom, a minor dragon lord named Aenar Targaryen sold all his possessions in the freehold and moved all his kin, wealth, and dragons to the western outpost of the empire, Dragonstone. His rivals saw this as nothing more than an act of surrender and denounced him as a coward. Little did they know that his maiden daughter, Destinies the Dreamer, had foreseen Valyria's demise. Thus the Targaryens were the only dragon lords to survive the Doom, becoming the Lords of Dragonstone, relying on their close allies on Blackwater Bay, the Valyrians and Celtigars, and more importantly, on their dragons, the last in all the world. In the aftermath of the Doom of Valyria, all of Essos was plunged into chaos. For over 100 years, murder and warfare ran rampant. Mighty nations were trampled and destroyed. Rulers of ancient lineages were cast down, and cities and towns burned. This age of carnage would be known in the histories as the Century of Blood. Without the firm hand of the Dragon Lords, the free cities warred against one another, seeking to fill in the vacuum of power. Foremost among them was Volantis. It was the first colony ever raised by the Freehold, and was thus known as the First Daughter. And like all firstborns, they laid claim to their inheritance. The Volantines believed themselves to be the heirs of the Dragon Lords and the rightful rulers of the world. But they soon found themselves deeply divided as to how to achieve this dominion. The denizens of the Black Walls, the Old Blood, believed in conquest and the sword, just as the Valyrians had done. They were opposed by the newer generation of merchants and moneylenders, who believed that instead of conquering the world, they might keep it indebted to them through trade and commerce. The two factions would be known as the Tigers and Elephants, respectively. Throughout the Century of Blood, the Tigers held dominance in Volantis, and under their rule, they declared war on the other free cities. Their fleets captured Lys, and their armies of slave soldiers subdued Myr, and their river galleys controlled the southern reaches of the Rhoyne, from Volantheris to Valasar. For 2 generations, they were all ruled from within the Black Walls. During their brief ascension, many heroes from among the Tigers achieved great renown. One such was Harano, who returned as Triarch for 40 years until he grew tired of election and declared himself Triarch for life. This infuriated his fellow Valyrians. He was quickly seized, deposed, and torn apart by war elephants. Yet despite all their gains, the Valyrian Empire would collapse under its own weight. When they sought to conquer Tyrosh, they bestirred the other free cities into action. The Sea Lord of Braavos provided a Lyseni exile with a fleet of 100 warships. Qohor and Norvos made common cause and sent fireships that broke Volantis' power on the Rhoyne. Mir and Lys rose up in rebellion and freed themselves from the Valyrian yoke. From the east, the Dothraki horse lords emerged from the Dothraki Sea to lay waste to towns and cities, driving common folk from their homes and nobles from their estates. And to the west, Pentos aided the Tyroshi in their struggle against Volantis, and soon they assembled a grand alliance to stand alongside them. Many and more joined this union, even from across the narrow sea. The Storm King, Argilac the Arrogant, led an army into the disputed lands in return for riches and glory. But the most powerful of these allies was the last Dragon Lord in the world, Aegon Targaryen. For over a century, his forebears looked to the east, lamenting their lost homeland, and dreamt of the day when they would restore their people's glory. But Aegon was a different sort of man. His gaze was drawn west, not east. Even so, when Pentos approached him, inviting him to join their alliance against Volantis, the Lord of Dragonstone heeded their call. But why? Perhaps he believed a Valyrian Empire could threaten his own plans of conquest. Or maybe he was sympathetic with the cause of the free cities. Whatever his reasons might have been, Aegon mounted his dragon, Valyrian the Dread, and flew east to meet with the Prince of Pentos and the city's magisters. From there, he flew to Lys, setting ablaze a Valyrian fleet before it could invade the city, thus ending the struggle. After a century of war, Volantis was broken, bankrupt, and depopulated. It was then that the elephants rose to power. During the transition, their followers went on a rampage, desecrating the statues of fallen tigers, those they blamed for all the wars and deaths. The elephants have thus held sway in Volantis in the centuries that followed, electing 2 or 3 triarchs from among their number, with no more than a single tiger being chosen. With the power of Volantis broken, peace followed, and the century of blood came to a close. For Aegon Targaryen, he flew back to Dragonstone, losing all interest in the east. And from within his ancestral seat, he and his sisters began their own preparations for war. A war that would reshape the 7 kingdoms of Westeros in fire and blood.